Have you ever wanted to make some rusty and dusty tracks? Well, look no further since this is the video for you. Welcome back everyone to another Modelling Seb video where today is time to tackle the tracks for the Patchwork Panzer IV. Now these here are a set of 3 model tracks that I assembled in the first episode of this series. With these tracks being metal, that means it's quite a bit easier to work with them and weather them to create our desired outcome. Now of course this tutorial of sorts can also be used for non-metal tracks, and I'll say how when it is needed. The first step for these tracks is to get them blackened. For this I'll be using VMS blackening fluid, which is effectively a corroding agent. This rusts the surface layer of the tracks and makes the tracks much easier to work with. This is because the blackened surface works as a primer of sorts. Now when blackening there are 2 possible approaches, the first method being the classic and intended one of placing the tracks into a mix of blackening fluid and warm water. Here simply you put the tracks in and let them sit overnight. This will create a basic and uniform layer. I'll be using this method on the shorter runs of the spare tracks. It is quite interesting to point out how quickly the tracks begin to react to the blackening fluid. The second method is done using an old toothbrush, and this time the blackening fluid is used straight out of the bottle. Here the goal is to create an uneven layer, since this creates a very interesting and unique base coat for the dust to be later added on. With both sets of tracks now finished, you can see just how different the effect is between the 2 methods. Now since plastic, resin and vinyl tracks can't be blackened, the best approach there is to instead prime the tracks in a mix of greys. Now before getting into the rusty and dusty tracks, I would like to thank my friend the Canadian scale modeler. He helped me out a lot here with these tracks and is actually starting out on YouTube. He told me he's going to be posting some really cool projects here soon, so if you would like to go check him out, the link to his channel is in the description. With the tracks blackened, it's time to get to the first part of the video, the rust. These spare tracks are going to be extremely rusty, possibly a little too much for them to be considered realistic. However, due to where I'll be placing them, that being attached as applique armor to the lower hull, I want them to still stand out after all the mud and dust is applied. Otherwise, if I kept the rust more subtle, I would risk the overall effect barely being noticeable. If these tracks would be in a more visible spot like in the front on a bracket or anywhere else on the tank, the effect would have been made lighter. But the first couple of steps remain the same. To make the rust a bit more unique to each track, the first thing that needs to be done is to apply several washes. These are made of a mix of grey and blue-grey acrylics. This can drastically change the outcome of the rust effect. For these I use about 5 different mixes made up of Vallejo sky blue, white and black. You can already see the difference these washes make as compared to a set of tracks that has not yet received them. Now, to actually start to make the tracks rusty, I'm going to be using the Rust and Dust acrylic set from Life Color. This is the same set I used on the Whippet tracks some time ago now. The first colour to be used is the lightest. This is thinned down and used as a wash, and is also applied using the speckling method. The same thing is then done with the second lightest colour. I'm working in reverse order since it's a lot easier to apply darker colours over light ones and have them still look the same rather than the opposite way around. Plus, fresh rust is still the most likely to appear over the entire tracks rather than the dark, old rust. The next colour is the base rust colour, and I no longer apply them straight onto the tracks as a wash, since it would be a bit too overpowering. It also means the undertones of greys and blues are unable to help create the texture they are supposed to make. This means I only speckle on this final tone. I do not apply the dark rust shadow. This is because this colour is a bit too strong and it's something I prefer to use for chipping. With the acrylics out of the way, it's time for enamels. Here I use MIG ammo streaking rust and light rust effects. Both of these are applied in a speckling method just to add a bit more colour difference to the track. The light rust especially helps to bring back some of that brighter tone, since the tracks are now beginning to look a bit too dark. The final step to finish these tracks is to use a small amount of light enamel rust. This is applied only onto where the wheels make contact with the tracks. This would result in the tracks being slightly polished, and thus, if they begin to rust, that would be the last place to do so. Although I doubt this will be visible after the tracks are glued on, I still want to apply it. I guess it's one of those nice to know it's there effects. And who knows, maybe it might still be seen on the complete model. Now, if you are enjoying this video so far, please do consider subscribing, as I am trying to reach 1,000 subscribers. Also, liking the video would help me in this forsaken algorithm. Also, if you are interested in joining a really cool scale modeling Discord channel, there is a link to one in the description. We are hosting several group builds and the community is just fantastic, filled with some great modelers. With this shameless shilling out of the way, back to the tracks. With the rusty tracks out of the way, now it is time to get onto the main track links and to make them extremely dusty. The uneven blackening already works as a base here, and you could potentially use the tracks as is on some models. I'm thinking something in the Pacific like a Japanese tank or a Sherman. But anyways, the first actual step is pre-dusting. Rather than pre-dusting like on a tank where I would spray the mix on, here instead I'll be adding it with a brush. This is because I am thinning it down heavily and applying it as a wash. For this I'm using the ultimate pre-shade as per the usual, with a bit more buff added in to mimic the dusty tones I am after. This being thinned down quite heavily is applied onto the tracks in uneven layers. This means that the partially blackened effect of the tracks themselves still pop through. If you are not using metal tracks, don't worry, that effect will be recreated in the next steps. With a pre-dust applied and left to dry, it is now time to get working with enamels. Here I will be using Dry Earth from the Ammo Splashes range. This provides a small amount of texture since the main effect is meant to mimic the drier summers of Russia. This means we are not going after the larger clumps of mud that would have been more common in spring or autumn. This dry tone is thinned down into a wash and applied liberally over the whole track run. Over the top of this, I choose to wet blend some Ammo Earth enamel. This is a darker, more rich tone which provides a small amount of contrast. Wet blending means that when the two colours are applied over the top of each other, they are allowed to blend together whilst drying, making the final result a bit more unique. It also adds to that uneven look that we are after for these tracks. With this done, I choose to once again use the same colours and speckle them onto the tracks. This creates even more texture since without large clumps, this artificial texture has to work instead. With this, the main dust effect is basically done. And if you were creating an abandoned tank, you could already potentially stop here. However, since the Patchwork Panzer IV is still operational, they need to be polished. Just like on the rusty spare tracks, the contact points need to be polished. The first part that I choose to clean off the dust and mud are the treads. Now, there is another amazing thing about metal tracks over any other type. Using a high grit sandpaper, the grit is about 2000, I gently sand the most exposed part of the tracks. I don't want them completely sanded down to that silver colour underneath due to the light colour of the dust, so instead I choose to only do the edges. This is why I choose such a high grit. If these tracks had cleats, it would have been much easier with a 200 grit sanding sponge, but sadly these didn't have them. Now, when working with non-metal tracks, the best way to achieve this polished look is either with a pencil or some silver paint. With the outside of the tracks polished, it's time to do the inside. Here the method is slightly different. Although you could sand down the contact points with the wheels to make it polished just like on the treads, it would look a little bit odd. So instead, I use a piece of graphite that I bought years ago. This is basically just a glorified pencil. By running this along the contact point, it makes it appear to be polished in a slightly different way. This is because the rubber tyres wouldn't polish them as much as rocks for the treads. After this, I use a silicone brush to make the pencil lines a bit more smooth. And with this, the tracks are 99% done. The last repetitive thing to do again is to apply some splashes using the Dry Earth and Earth. I apply these onto the freshly polished surfaces to still make them appear muddy and dusty. Now, with this all done, I think it's about time for me to thank you all for watching this video. If you have enjoyed it, please consider subscribing and liking this video, as it would help me out a lot. Now, I must say that this video has been more than a bit delayed, but that is for a very good reason. The next video that will be coming out in about a week or two is a massive one, easily the longest video I've ever made for this channel. It will be the full weathering of the Panzer IV, from the chipping to the mud to all other effects. So click the notification button to not miss out on that giant. With that all out of the way, I would like to once again thank you all for watching, and especially those who have watched this far. You really do help me out in the algorithm. So again, a big thank you, and I'll see you all next time finishing the Panzer IV. Good luck and enjoy modelling.